So, I think today I'm talking a little bit about feelings and emotions because I see a lot of people like just stuck in a certain state. So, in society, it goes around, I think, especially for men, to suppress emotions, to not feel anything. And I think that doesn't really make a man. Like, you obviously need to feel your emotions if you want to also be more aware of what's going on. So if we just stuck in rationality, then for one thing, like we can be messed with emotionally because if you ignore emotions, if you suppress emotions, then you're not aware of like what someone else does because it's done emotionally. It's like when people are not aware what drives them because they do not acknowledge their emotions, then they just act automatically out of that emotion. So, and when people when anyone like pays attention to something, it's because like they have an underlying emotion. So sure, like the content you consume can evoke a certain emotion, but more often than not, people are stuck in a certain emotion, and that's why their attention is always drawn to the same content, to the same stuff, because they do not acknowledge what emotion is actually driving them, and the emotion is driving them to that kind of content, to that kind of article, news, whatever. There is something underneath an emotion that drives them to look at that. But instead of like looking inside, looking inwards, feeling the emotions, staying with the emotions, feeling the sensation of the emotions, they're kind of like letting just the attention being drawn to something outside of themselves that essentially reflects what they have inside of them. So I'm bringing that up because I see a lot of people like being stuck in in a certain emotion, certain feeling, and they're not even aware of it. And like life has so much more to offer than like that little like box, that little thing. And yeah, but we can only move forward. We can only like expand as we like acknowledge those things, right? We cannot run away from them. We can consume a lot of content, but in reality, like the moment we actually like turn inwards a little bit, like pay attention to like, okay, so what is the underlying emotion or feeling that drives me to watch this, or what is this trying to evoke in me when I'm reading that content, reading that article, reading that news article, or watching that kind of content. What is it evoking in me, or what is it supposed to evoke in me? So then we can let go of that. But if we don't do that, then like it's very easy to also ignore all signals that actually keeps us safe, that actually like helps us to navigate life in a better way, or like being even aware of like what is being done or what's happening. So if someone does something that evokes a certain emotion, that can be a very good signal to something, you know. It's like when people say anger is bad. Anger is not bad. Anger tells us like where a boundary is overstepped that we feel not okay with, right? So yeah, but if we are being taught, no, that's bad. Don't be that way. Don't acknowledge that those feelings. Don't have that. No, like the issue comes when like emotions are being like unobserved, and we just acting out of the emotion. So where we don't question it, where we don't sit with it to understand where does it come from, where does the emotion come from, where is it maybe even something from the past, or is it something really present, you know? Does it reflect something of the past? So, but if someone wants to like elevate go beyond what they currently experience, well, that's only possible like after acknowledging the emotion, right? Otherwise, like someone is stuck in that. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing in society, where emotions drive people instead of like acknowledging the emotion that comes up, but then you get in control. But most people don't do that, right? You get in control by observing the emotion, being with the emotion, feeling the emotion, because then you don't act out of it, you know. But yeah, that's especially for men in society. It goes around like, no, a real man has no emotion. A real man doesn't feel anything, and that's not true. Well, it should not be true. Like I think a lot go through life suppressing their emotions, but that's not good. Eventually it needs to be processed. Eventually it needs to come out. Eventually it stays, right? It doesn't leave. So the best thing someone can do is really just like sitting with whatever comes up and paying attention to what kind of content you consume, because that's a good mirror to like what goes inside of yourself, right? So like it's possible that something outside of yourself tries to evoke a certain emotion, but if more often than not, like when we are drawn, or our attention is on a general kind of content, it's a mirror to what goes on inside of ourselves. So, but instead of like going inside of ourselves, understanding what emotion could drive you, what emotion or feeling is like potentially driving you right now, your attention might be drifting into like the outside world, into the something outside of yourself that you can consume that essentially just reflects what you feel inside of yourself, or that you have inside of yourself that you haven't felt through or haven't acknowledged, right? So that's why you also see people like, for example, like if someone is heartbroken, they miss someone, what kind of music they listen to. It's always like, oh, I miss Where Are You? And like, you know, or like whatever it might be, or fear-based, like if you like don't acknowledge that you feel doom, then what kind of content are you watching? Most predominantly, you know, it's gonna be content about end of the world. Here, this is how the world's gonna end, and like that doesn't dismiss like, yeah, like the world is like going in a certain direction, but if you're consumed by it, then it's because like the emotion is driving you, not because like you choosing to maybe watch something that gives you more information about where the world might go to, you know, or maybe even being able to like look at the opposite side. How could the opposite be true? But yeah, so today is just a little bit about emotions and feelings. So you're not less of a man because you're actually acknowledging your emotions, because you're actually feeling your emotions. And yeah, I think this is about for today's topic, and I'll see you in the next video.